Welcome to Healing Your Families. I'm Emily Penrod, and I help you as a parent go from frustration, stress, and overwhelm to calm, confidence, and joy so that you can achieve the quality of family life that you desire. That's what I want for you. In today's episode, we're continuing our series on communication. We've talked about communication within the family. I've invited a special guest today, Sandra McKechnie. Sandra, hello.
Hey, Amalu. Wonderful to be here with you. Really good.
And I'm excited to talk to her because she can help us with the important task of helping our children learn how to communicate with the rest of the world. And as we know, children learn from example. So we need to know. We need to learn this for ourselves and then we can teach it to our children. Let me tell you about Sandra. Sandra McKechnie is the CEO of Sandra McKechnie Productions, keynote speaker, presenter of the cultural sensitivity and awareness trainings called Double Consciousness. And I'm hoping you'll tell us why there are two B's. Sandra is also a certified life coach with an anti bias and anti oppression lens, partnering especially with both marginalized and non marginalized peoples as they tap into their conscious unawareness. Sandra offers support in these areas of sensitivity, promoting racial harmony. She is also passionate about holding space with women who have been through diverse challenges and intersections in the life they have lived and are living, partnering with them, turning it all into their best life. She's the host of her video podcast, Voices of Humanity, at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of the new media, where she is very interested in interviewing coaches that represent the many faces and voices of humanity. That is an impressive resume there, Sandra.
And you read it so well. That's nice. You took your time and read it well.
Yes, yes. And I loved a lot of the phrases you used. The conscious unawareness. I'm assuming you're going to be covering all of these, and I have to just let you go and do it in the
Well,
order that's best for you. So go ahead.
the tapping into is like a look. It's like a tagline for what I do. Tapping into your conscious unawareness. So meaning you may just be aware that you may be unaware that possibly in relationship to marginalized peoples and so-called minorities and so many other groups that come through our trainings, and there's a plethora of intersections, double consciousness. So double consciousness, first of all, means two streams of thought and two social identities. And it has everything to do with, some people call it code switching, meaning that culturally you show up a certain way, Monday to Friday at your job. And then when you go with your family, you show up another way, right? You have your culture coming in, your ethnicity, and everything fits in. Now, a lot of people do this, but it's a little bit different with people that have been like our indigenous brothers and sisters, people that came across the trans-Saharan trade, transatlantic slave trade, when you have been assimilated upon trauma for hundreds of years. But today, I really wanted to, if I may, wanted to just really share about implicit bias, implicit racial bias, and how we can pass that to each other as adults. And then we can, and our trainings are big about passing it on to the next generation. So, did you want me to go for it?
Yes. Yeah, well, and did you want to share anything about how what drew you to this? How did
Oh,
you
yes, of course. Well, and we're
Okay.
not together now, but there was a part of me, and of course, my grandfather is part, he is Scottish as well, and my dad is mixed race. Um, so I learned quite a bit about what certain things look like, prejudice and, certain types of dehumanization and so on.
Sandra, I'm going to interrupt you for just one brief moment.
Yes.
Your video froze for just a second. If you would please
Oh,
repeat about
sure.
your ancestry.
Okay. We were talking about, yes, how this came to me, right? Okay, so I was saying that, in a nutshell, how it came to me, is that there was something missing in my life. Historically, people that came across the trade or in apartheid, we have an assimilation process that happened for hundreds of years, where we were conditioned, assimilated upon trauma, to act like the dominant group, to behave like them in every way. You look like them, talk like them, take the whip and beat, the slaves to death like them, unfortunately. But that's the reality. That's our reality. But at the end of the day, you are not them. You're nothing. So there's a way in which we may show up in the 21st century. And that's how I came to it, in understanding that there was a total disconnect from my heritage. And that was passed to me. I was taught to do this, and just, pull up yourself by your bootstraps in the 21st century. Forget about that and move on. And you don't ask any group to do that, and our Jewish brothers and sisters, they own their heritage and very proud of it, but ours was taken from us. So I woke up and I really wanted to pass some of the things on, some of the untruths and the challenges around implicit bias, implicit racial bias. When we see Muslims, there's an Islamophobia that's still out here that's really challenging, and thinking that all people from, are terrorists, which is so inaccurate. And it has a lot to do with our stereotypes and things we were taught. And so we're trying not to pass those things to our children, the next generation. That's what our trainings are also huge on, helping our parents to really grab a hold of some of this. When you see your Indigenous brothers and sisters, your First Nations, Métis, our American Indians, Inuit, what is it that comes to mind first? What do you think when you see them on the street? Maybe they're drinking, and what goes through your mind? And we want people to tap into that, so that they become aware of what they're thinking within themselves. Very personal, but tapping and leaning into what you're thinking, so you're able to look at it and perhaps correct it with some knowledge, of course, and education.
Yes, education is huge.
It is, hello. Yes, it changed my life as to how I think of myself. So I can go ahead. Is that good, or did you want me to go ahead and share?
You were saying something about your grandfather and where he came.
Oh, yes. Okay, so my dad is mixed race. My grandfather's Scottish, and I've learned, we had a lot of sort of class distinction growing up, and because we were assimilated upon trauma via slavery, of course, to think this way, to think that there's a saying that says, a white is right, a black get back, brown stick around. And it's it pretty much just sort of defines the barriers that we have had to go through, that are really out there. So it's getting parents to really understand, in families, how do you and I police implicit bias? How do we police that in ourselves? How do we walk the beat and use our baton and just kind of stay aware, tap into the fact that the four states of competency, they're called, the gentleman that came up with that, but I call them the 4 states of awareness, where you start with unconscious unawareness. So in essence,
you don't know, you don't know.
Absolutely. And you have your hands over your eyes, maybe over your ears, and you believe that what you don't know, it won't hurt you. And inevitably it does, because you pass on things, regardless of whether your heart wants to or not. You end up passing things on to the next generation. Emma Lou, there was a beautiful man in one of my trainings, a gentleman in one of the trainings. And I remembered, and we've had this a number of times, people just have this awakening where they just sit for a moment, very emotional. And we were speaking, and the content of this 8-hour training is vast. And we go into history, and we direct people to the resources so that they can look at it themselves. And this gentleman said, I saw this type of bias and prejudice in my child. And this is a man, he's a social worker and cares very much about people and in minorities and so-called minorities and marginalized peoples. And when he got this awakening, it was so clear to me. He became very emotional for a moment, and he had to freeze. He said, "So that means, how else would my child learn this at this age, unless I passed it to my child?" And it moved all of us in the room. We had some silence because he really had this awareness that he wants to change some stuff. And that's the wonderful place to be. So he's that sort of that second place of tapping in to his conscious unawareness, becoming aware that he may not be aware of some things, and now he wants to go on and do something about it.
That's when you
Nobody's
can
fault.
do something.
Absolutely. And with one thing we tout in the training is, it's not my fault, but I can do something about it. And that's a beautiful place to be.
I totally agree. So you mentioned the 4 stages. You're first of all,
Yes,
you're unaware of the fact that you don't know, and
that's
then
right. And
you're
then
aware.
of your unawareness. And then the next one would be conscious awareness. So now you're aware, right, that you're conscious, you're awake, and you're starting. Maybe you're going to join Emma Lou's shows. You're going to tap into a lot of these beautiful shows on win-win women, and you're going to learn different things and become so aware. Health and wellness is huge, and this is part of health and wellness, really. So you start to tap into that. And then the fourth one is the optimum, it's unconscious awareness. So now it's autonomic. So you hear someone say something, perhaps against an indigenous brother and sister or sister. You hear someone say something against blacks or Muslims, and LGBTQs, and you stand up, or you are able to say something, and something kind, something that just you become a coach.
So it's
Just something that causes people to tap into the fact that, that may not have been
it,
appropriate.
it becomes automatic. It's just part of who
Yes.
you are.
Yes. And even if you don't say something, because sometimes, it may not be safe, but
Yeah.
you sit with it and keep your avenue of awareness open. That's the
Yeah,
big deal.
that is. And one this may be a word of caution for parents. We really like to feel like we know it, we've got the answers, and it may take some humility to say, maybe I don't know everything.
I know. This is challenging. I have 4 beautiful young men that call me auntie. They're white young men. They go up to 30 years old, and then there's a little girl. Of course, it's my girlfriend's children. We've known each other over 25 years. She's a white lady. We have a beautiful time with this. And when I started waking up to this, because I'm amongst a lot of people that just, let's pull up yourself by your bootstraps and move on, as if we just showed up here in the 21st century. But we brought a lot of things with us, and so did our counterparts. So did my white brothers and sisters. They brought a lot of things with them. So we were sharing about her boys who feel like, auntie, hey, I got black friends. I treat people well, and I would do anything for anyone, and they would. But because it's not by proximity, because you have black friends, or if because you've married a black woman, or you've married or you've married an indigenous, whatever the group is. It doesn't mean that you are aware. You may have bias and prejudice, and you may be even going to work and causing some measure of oppression, and you are actually unintentionally, in an unconscious way, you may be causing harm, and you're not aware of it.
I I love that idea. Again, that unconscious awareness. I was raised by 2 parents who grew up in rural Arizona, and they taught us to be respectful and courteous to everyone. But my mother once confided in me that, and again, it wasn't her fault, it was the way she was raised,
Right.
that it just wasn't appropriate for blacks and whites to mix socially. I mean, of course we treat them with respect and kindness, but we just, they're not in our inner circle.
Yes. Yes.
And and you don't and you think, well, she wasn't really prejudiced, she wasn't really hurting anyone. But that's the marginalized that you're talking about.
Well,
The
yes,
people who can be there and still feel like they're not part of the group.
absolutely. And there's ways in which we have been, by the media, billboards, television, movies we watch, we have been subliminally seduced into thinking certain things about different groups, which aren't based on any research we've done. But we trust where we are in the system that we're under, and we listen to certain things and we take it verbatim that this is how it is. And you can't even say or find the end of the thread as to why you think the way you think. You may
Yeah.
see somebody in a car, a group of people driving, and you might think about this group, oh, they don't know how to drive. Well, where did you get that from? And you may hear it year after year in your life, and you weren't taking stats, but all of a sudden you actually believe on some level that this group doesn't know how to drive. And the thing about bias is that it usually has a measure of truth. However, can I share the screen, or do you want me to share the
Yeah,
screen?
yes, go ahead.
Okay. However, let's just look at this for a minute. Let me get into that. There we go. I hope that's the right one. I think it is. Collected. Okay, let me go over here. I think this is the one. Perfect. And we'll share that with you. And I will start the slideshow. Good job. Here we are. And I'll do a view here for myself. Thanks for your patience. Where's the presenter view? I don't see one here. That's
You're
okay.
in presenter
We can do it.
view now.
Oh, am I now? I was looking for that little, that little thing on the side there.
Yeah, you're in presenter view. It's a good, clear
Okay.
image.
All right, great. All right, let me move you over here. You know how you have to do that. You're in the way there, Emily. Let me move that. Okay, so policing implicit racial bias comes with 3 questions. And this is part of a coaching consultation thing that I do. Can you spot implicit racial bias in yourself? That is a major thing to look at. So
I don't know that I could say yes to that. I'm not sure.
I know.
I think I'm still on the, the conscious unawareness.
For sure. And that's okay. That's an okay spot to be at. A homeless person, say you see a homeless person on the street. So I'm just going to give you scenarios just so you can just think a little bit. A homeless person, you're seeing them there, and they may be Indigenous. You may pass one that is First Nations, Métis Inuit, American Indian, or it could be a Black person there, right? Or you may find somebody there, and maybe you're looking and you're wondering, what do they want? What are you really thinking at that time? There's a number of things we could be thinking. Are we thinking, get up and get a job? Are we thinking, I don't know.
My concern is,
right.
One thing I want to change is I'm not really looking. It's like I want to pretend he isn't there.
Oh, Emily,
I know.
I love you for that. That's amazing. I love you for that. That is terrific. And yeah, sometimes things are like, oh no, it's almost a little bit like what I don't know won't hurt me. At one point or another, I'm freezing a little bit. Can you hear
You're
me?
okay now. And I've learned that the majority have some kind of a mental health illness. They really need treatment. They need better care.
Yes,
and it's a huge problem. And sometimes it seems overwhelming, and so we think I am gonna, yeah.
Yes, no, I hear you. I hear you. The big thing is, what are we thinking about that person when those that are going to look? And I know you will look eventually. What are we thinking when we see those people? Where did we get our formation from?
I want to challenge myself to make eye contact and smile at them and tell them hello. I'm wondering, don't they wish people would just acknowledge their existence?
Hello. I've had an opportunity to have some wonderful conversations with people, and some I wasn't able to engage with, but just tap in, and it's a safe space that I was at on the street and other people are around, but just really standing and having a bit of a conversation, if one can do that. But this whole thing, this implicit stuff that we think, it's just reevaluating. So what we do with the trainings is give people an opportunity to deconstruct some things, and it happens automatically with the content. You deconstruct mindsets, don't destroy, but you're just sort of pulling things apart and wondering, maybe I need to remove that, maybe I need to tweak that, and then reconstructing mindsets. And I'm really pushing up against, I'm working toward that myself. So can you spot implicit racial bias in yourself? And these are some ways you can sort of tap into that. Every time, it's challenging because our Muslims, they watch the news. And many of them, when they hear things or there's someone that says the word terrorist attack or something, they're terrified. And so if we are aware, education is an amazing thing. If we are aware of the beautiful amount of people, I'm sure we are, a lot of us, but some, they have a challenging time with that. And we do the same thing. Oh my goodness. We've heard things and we haven't proven them for ourselves. So it is about knowledge. You don't have to get a degree in history or, anthropology, but certainly just checking yourself and thinking, well, what do I really know about that, right? There was a term, so can you spot it in yourself is huge. If you can spot it in yourself, and it usually comes with education, right? There's a term that goes way back to 1995 called super predators. Super predators, so that looks like a lion pouncing and has no mercy on its prey, or a hawk, and those people visually looked like Blacks or Indigenous brothers and sisters, Latinx. This whole super predator campaign, I would call it, was a professor from Princeton U. He did a whole article and he was predicting that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, young juveniles, would be arrested, and there would be rape, and there would be murder, and there was it was very visceral in the way that this thing was being promoted. Well, didn't you know he was wrong? The stats were wrong. No such thing happened. The way that he said, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, it didn't happen. And there was an apology. I was wrong. There's a video out there and you can hear him apologizing, but think about it. There was like a campaign behind this. And when you think of the apology, the damage, there's been a certain damage already done to this bias that people may have already had stacked against this group, these young men, these different groups here. So even there's a, I don't know if you've ever seen it, years ago, there was a movie, early 1900s, called Birth of a Nation. Woo, this is to date. It was touted as a piece of history in black and white, and nobody speaking, right? It's one of those silent films. And here you have Black men, well, of course, white men in blackface, because we didn't get those roles, right, at that time. But there was one scene in there. They portrayed Black men as men, as one eating a turkey, all messy, like an animal. And then there was one scene with a lovely young woman, a white woman, sitting she's just there enjoying her day, kind of frolicking there in the breeze, having a nice time. Well, out comes this Black man, a white man in blackface, and he looks grimacing, and he's just coming toward her, literally like this, stalking her. And she looks at him and she runs toward this cliff, and she jumps over to her own demise. And this was touted, and the message there was, I'd rather jump off this cliff to my demise than be raped by a Black man. There's a lot of these perpetual things that we wonder, where did this come from? And it has a lot to do with knowledge. And once we have the knowledge, we know the truth, we feel a certain freedom. Then we know what we're going to come up against if we're going to do a walk-in or a walk-out, and it makes sense. And I always caution people in Black Lives Matter, and there's a lot of amazing people in Black Lives Matter that mean well. But I always say, if people could sit down and listen to our elders, right, and some of our forefathers, then they would really understand what the Black Lives Movement is really all about. and understand what it's supposed to look like fundamentally. So, I mean, and there's a lot more to it than that. But if we have some knowledge, we really can pass this on to our children correctly. So can you spot implicit racial bias in yourself? Really important to be able to spot it. Really important. And I've had the opportunity to spot it in myself. I was at a Dairy Queen one day in the city with a friend of mine, and there were these Black men in front of the Dairy Queen with hoodies, all of about 3 of them. And she got out, she's going in to get her ice cream, and I froze. I was fearful. I thought, hoodies, they're going to case the joint and they're going to rob it. And my friend looked at me, she said, I can't stand you. Stop it. Stop it. So she went in to get her ice cream. And, you know, were they there to rob the joint? No, they were there to buy ice cream. And I had to kind of correct myself. These young men like the fashion of the time. They're wearing, so you could say that about a lot of groups, right, Emmylou? You know.
Yeah. Now we only have 4 minutes, and I want to make sure you're going to have time to talk about.
This was good. Okay, let's move on quickly.
You.
So this is that main point is very important. And just, can you spot it, implicit racial bias in someone else? But first, you need to become aware if you're spotting it in someone else, you know, it has to come through you first. So that is it. The last one says, if you can or you can't spot it, what would you like to do about it? If you're already doing this work and you want to press toward this mark to really take stress off of marginalized people and so-called minorities, that would be great. Please get in touch with me. My email is double consciousness, 2 B's in double. I chose 2 B's because there was nothing else. And it works well because it's about double consciousness. Right? doubleconsciousness@gmail.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Sandra McKechnie.
Was there any other slides you wanted to share?
Oh, sure. If you have time I can just move on for a minute here.
We have 3 minutes.
Okay. So these are the tips I wanted to leave people with. To really police implicit racial bias, it starts with you, what we just said, tapping into those 4 areas of unawareness, right? So unconscious unawareness, you don't want to really stay there because you may end up hurting people without knowing it. And you want to move to the next level of unconscious awareness. And then you want to move on, right? And keep moving until you really,
until it becomes who you are.
Oh, yes. The autonomic one, right? Unconscious unawareness, where it's just happening. So your family, and your community, all of that is going to make a difference.
I love that. They're talking.
Yes,
and I thought of that too. You know, just talk to someone.
That's right.
Yeah, I invariably find out that we have more in common. There are more ways that we are alike than that we are different.
Yes.
Let's just talk to them, rather than, just get to know them.
That's a whole other level of awareness for sure. Good picture for that. Yeah.
Okay. So are you through sharing your screen?
I think that's about it. I don't want to go on to, there's much more there, but we don't want
I love that photograph. I love that message. It begins with us, and in our families, again, we can teach our children this awareness, it goes beyond just being, and again, as I said, my parents taught me to be respectful and kind, but we can just inclusive. We can just spread out our arms and gather in everyone.
Absolutely.
And just ask somebody how they feel. Ask them what they're more comfortable with.
And people have known different groups for years. They invite them for dinner, they go out. But because some groups, marginalized people, minorities, might not bridge or feel that they can have that deep level, like what we're just sharing here, you might have known them for 20 years, but they're not able to do that with you. And it doesn't mean that everything's great, but it just means they may not be able to go to that level with you.
Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Come back again next week at the same time. We're making the world a better place by strengthening families, one family at a time. This is Emmylou Penrod with HealingYourFamilies.com. And Sandra, thank you so much for joining us and helping us learn how we can strengthen our families and make the world a better place.
Thanks, Emma Lou.